Now, Kazakhstan is reeling under the impact of the worst violence in its recent history. Kazakh President Kassym-Jomart Tokayev has blamed Islamist militants for the unprecedented violence that hit the country last week. The president says that his country had weathered an attempted coup d'etat. According to Tokayev, the attempt was coordinated by what he called a single center. Speaking at a meeting of Russian-led CSTO military alliance, Tokayev said that the order has now been restored in Kazakhstan, but that the hunt for terrorists was still underway. He also added that foreign fighters from Central Asian countries, Afghanistan and the Middle East were involved.
Для безопасности страны предотвращены. В рамках антитеррористической операции ведется работа по выявлению лиц, участвовавших в преступлениях. На сегодня в органы полиции доставлено около 8 тысяч лиц. Правоохранительными и специальными органами проверяется их причастность к актам терроризма, убийствам, мародерствам и иным преступлениям.
The violence last week marked the worst unrest in the former Soviet Republic. President Kassym-Jomart Tokayev described last week's events as terrorist aggression, also dismissed reports of the authorities fighting peaceful demonstrators. The Kazakh government has released a video which shows protesters clashing with the police. The footage also showed a burnt-out building, which the government says was a television studio. Damaged police cars in Kassym city can also be seen here. Now, just over a week ago, demonstrations against a fuel price rise began before erupting into a wider protest. 16 members of the security forces were killed, while the number of civilian casualties is still being checked. The Interior Ministry of the Central Asian nation has said security forces in Kazakhstan have detained nearly 10,000 people. CSTO has also sent about 2,500 mostly Russian troops to Kazakhstan as peacekeepers. A large-scale counter-terrorism operation would soon end along with a CSTO mission. Separately, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov and his Chinese counterpart Wang Yi discussed the Kazakhstan situation. Both countries have voiced their firm support to efforts by the Kazakh authorities to restore order. In the aftermath of the Kazakh unrest, Russian President Vladimir Putin has even said that Russian-led bloc will stymie any coup. Now, Putin said that the Russian-led military alliance would not allow its member governments to be toppled in ex-Soviet color revolutions.
Мы понимаем, что события в Казахстане не первая и далеко не последняя попытка вмешательства извне во внутренние дела наших государств. Я здесь согласен с Александром Григорьевичем. И принятые по линии ОДКБ меры ясно показали, что мы не позволим раскачивать ситуацию у себя дома и не дадим реализовать сценарий так называемых цветных революций.
Now, following a request from Tokayev, the CSTO has deployed troops and military hardware. Troops will remain in Kazakhstan until the situation stabilizes fully. And for more on this, we're now being joined by Russian affairs expert Fred Weir. Thank you so much for joining us. And now, President Tokayev has labelled the protests as an attempted coup and has blamed the unrest on a foreign-trained bandits and terrorists. How do you assess this statement?
Well, it is what they say, and they have considerable amount of evidence. There are other theories. Of course, the socioeconomic situation, especially in Western Kazakhstan, where these protests started, is very dire. The doubling of gas prices was obvious, the kind of shock that creates protests anywhere in the world. But the way that violence accelerated, the way it spread around the country, there's mounting evidence that it was organized and or channeled. At least the protesters might have been genuine, but something happened. People were directing them. Police disappeared from the streets. So there is a theory also that it was part of an internal power struggle in Kazakhstan that forces inside the country were directing this in an attempted coup, which is what Mr. Tokayev said. But the Russians have been, for many years now, since the Americans indicated they were getting out of Afghanistan almost a decade ago, they've been extremely concerned about what would happen after. I know I've written several stories about this, going and talking to Russian security experts, and it was a major obsession of theirs, security in Central Asia. And the Russians have said that the rather disorderly American withdrawal from Afghanistan last year created a vacuum. Right. And they say that this may have in some way stimulated the movement of armed gangs. Afghanistan may again be becoming a platform for those radical militants to spread around the region. This is certainly something Russia's been concerned with, and its allies as well. Okay. And these events have triggered their fears extremely much.
Right, sir. Now, also speaking of Russian troops, they were invited to help quell the unrest. Now, Kazakhstan president has said that the Russian-led contingent will exit the country in no more than 10 days. And this is after Washington has raised doubts over the involvement of Russian troops. How do you assess the situation?
You know, if only Washington could stage its interventions and get them done so efficiently and quickly, they might have something to say about it. I don't think anybody in Moscow isn't laughing at what Washington says about this, really. But it is a sign that the Russians have got this under control, that they've made their point, which is solidarity with post-Soviet states. We will step in to help you when this unrest kind of strikes. And it does regularly in the post-Soviet region. I mean, it's just in the last 3 years, we've seen serious unrest in Armenia, in Belarus, in Kyrgyzstan, and now Kazakhstan. So this is a Soviet phenomenon, and Russia and its allies are clearly developing long-term tools to deal with it.
All right. Also, President Tokayev has also accused his predecessor Nursultan Nazarbayev of creating a section of wealthy elite in the country. This in light of the anger over poverty. How do you see this criticism of the 81-year-old who still remains a very powerful force in Kazakhstan?
Well, it's certainly true, and it's true across the post-Soviet region that the first stage, at least, of post-Soviet economics featured oligarchs and extreme inequality and income disparities that are quite shocking, even in Russia, certainly in most other post-Soviet states, Ukraine, Armenia, Kazakhstan is not an exception. So this is a problem that they will have to deal with because obviously these kind of extremes, poverty and wealth, generate discontent, which can lead to these kind of upsurges.
Right. Also, just for more clarity on this, what can we expect going forward? Now, as you mentioned earlier as well, the protest started out as demand for lower fuel prices, but soon the situation spiraled out of control.
Well, yes, and I think that what you saw with that CSTO intervention was a full dress rehearsal of how they intend to deal with this sort of thing in the future. It's elite solidarity, governments standing together, not necessarily good for the people of the region. I think there is a strong social argument there. But it is in the interests of stability, and if you've seen the kind of revolutions that can erupt around here, the damage they can do, it's not a surprise that most people in this region, most regular people, do prize stability. But beyond stability, I think that this region, if they're going to they're united in a Eurasian Economic Union, they need to move forward to develop programs for spreading the wealth.
Right. Mr. Fred Weir, thank you so much for joining us with all your inputs on this.
Thank you.
WION is now available in your country. Download the app now. Get all the news on the move.